Welcome to Mysteries of Superstition Mountain. I'm Larry Hedrick, where we bring the past into the present for our future viewers. Today we have another great story by Hank Shaffer.
Well, you've seen the title page for this video, and you're probably wondering, what the heck is Wit-Kisara? And once you get past that, you're wondering, and what does that have to do with anything that we're going to talk about? Well, according to Apache legend, all mountains are known as Wit-Kisara, and that means the rocks standing up. It is said that all mountains, not just the Superstition Mountains, are a sort of purgatory that all Apaches must pass through at one time or another. That seemed fitting for this story, as we're going to talk about another hapless adventurer out there looking for treasure. And he almost meets his demise the same as so many others have. He's a fella that came over here. He's an older fella, and he maintained that he knew exactly where the Lost Dutchman mine was. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that. Well, this is a story by Tom Collenborn, and I'm going to try and tell it the way I think Tom might have told it back then. So here goes. During the first half of the 20th century, Apache Junction, and more correctly, the Superstition Mountains over here in Arizona, was a pretty busy place. In large part, the insurgence of people coming over here was because of the legends of whatnot of the Lost Dutchman mines, not to mention all the other treasure stories that came about that live up here in the Superstition Mountains. People came from all over the planet with the hopes of becoming rich, and it was usually beyond any dream that they could ever possibly have, that they were going to find out here. As soon as they got in the mountain, they're going to find this treasure. There were a lot of people that were in the mountains already, and they had, I don't want it to sound like there were people stacked on top of people, but there were people in the mountain already that had permanent camps, or very close to permanent camps, that had been there for years, and they were searching for treasures. But I want you to understand that from the pictures we're going to show you throughout this video, the Superstition Mountain isn't the way it's portrayed on the maps, that it makes everything look small. The vastness of this mountain is a good place for anybody to get lost if they don't know what they're doing. We have a saying over here that it's really not all that bad. If you get into a canyon, just keep walking, and eventually you'll get out. But it's big. It's a big place to be, and you can get lost if you don't know what you're doing. Now, on Saturday, January 19th, 1946, a New York Magazine writer by the name of Meyer Schubitz showed up at Doc Nation's camp, which was up on the mountain over near Peralta Canyon area. He was anxious to head up into the Superstition as quickly as he could to search for the Dutchman's gold. He sincerely believed that he had an advantage once he got into the mountains for locating Waltz's treasure, because he was German, and he could think the same way that the Germans did, and his thoughts would be the same as what Jacob Waltz's had been. Take that for what it's worth. Now, Andy Sinbad was another old-timer up on the mountain, and he always said that Meyer was nothing more than a crackpot, or nothing more than a misguided German adventurer. He was a dreamer. Andy didn't have much use for him. On top of all else, Meyer Schubitz was an old man, and he wasn't in very good physical shape. He tried to convince Doc Nations there at the camp to guide him into the mountains. But the doc took one good look at him, and he said, "There's not a prayer in the world that I'm taking that man up in there." He said he just won't survive. However, Doc Nations had a friend who was close by, and he said that he would take the old man in. The fellow's name was James Watkins, and he agreed that he would be Meyer's guide getting into the mountain. Now, that area had a couple of permanent camps where Nations was. One was Old Man Pierce's camp in Needle Canyon. Another was Chuck Eiler's Caballo Camp in East Boulder Canyon. Watkins figured if Schubitz got himself into any kind of a jackpot, that there were people out there that could probably help him get out of it. And that was his reasoning for taking the man in. Schubitz and Watkins left the camp early the following day on January 20th. That was a Sunday. They made their first camp about 1.5 miles north of Weaver's Needle in East Boulder Canyon, above Chuck Oller's camp. As I said, Schubitz was in a hurry to find what the Dutchman had left behind. But crazy as it might sound, the next day, somewhere north of Weaver's Needle, Schubitz threw all caution to the wind. He told his guide, James Watkins, to return to camp. He said he had no longer any need for his services. But Watkins told him that it would prove to be a fool's game for someone who knew so little about the mountain. Nevertheless, Schubitz insisted, and Watkins was forced to go back to Nation's camp. It didn't take long before Watkins became concerned about the old man. And the more he thought about it, the more he decided he ought to go and look for him. He searched for a half a day or so and couldn't find any signs of him at all. And he decided to walk back to Doc's camp and tell him what he had found. From there, they contacted Sheriff Jimmy Herron. Now, the sheriff quickly organized a posse of searchers. He brought them out to Nation's camp. At this point, they put out a diligent search for the man, and they didn't find anything. Well, by this time, Meyer Schubitz had been missing for 2 days in the rugged backcountry of the Superstition Mountains. It wasn't until Thursday, when 2 other men were out prospecting in the Bars Canyon, that they found the old man in even worse condition than he'd been when they first got there. He was wandering around like so many others that had been out there looking, totally disoriented and lost in the mountain's clutches. Schubitz insisted he was close to finding the golden treasure, but unfortunately he was in no condition to continue. His treasure hunting pursuits would have to come to an end. After breakfast on that Thursday morning, he was taken back to the trailhead near a cabin owned by William Linsby. Once there, Linsby notified Jimmy Herron again up there at Doc Canyon's camp. Herron immediately went to Linscamp's cabin and picked up Meyer to get him back to town and to safety. Ironically, after recuperating, Schubitz left the territory and he never came back again to fulfill his dream of finding the Dutchman's mine. Meyer Schubitz didn't fulfill his dream, but the inexperienced treasure hunter was lucky to escape with his life. Far too many others were not as fortunate as he was, so he should have considered himself pretty lucky. Well, I gotta tell you, my sincere thanks go out to Tom Collenborn for this story. It's one that you don't hear very often, but the guy hunting for treasure was just another loser. It is yet another tale about a man and his dream to find golden riches in the rugged Superstition Mountain area. The lesson just never seems to get learned. Many have perished in these mountains. There are so many people that have gone up there and they've died. They've died of exhaustion. They've been shot and killed. There's just all sorts of things that have come about. But this doesn't seem to discourage more folks from risking their lives to look for this gold of Jacob Waltz. Why was Meyer Schubitz chosen to be such a lucky guy? Why was he chosen to survive in the unforgiving superstition? Who knows? It's just another one of those mysteries of the Superstition Mountains. Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.